believe that we are live. So welcome everyone. I am so excited today. I'm going to be your host tonight. My name is Roseanne Service and I'm an admin with the Uplift Community of Faith. And joining me today is the lovely Ganel-Lyn Condie. I am so excited to be with you today, Ganel-Lyn.
I'm grateful to be here too. We had a little technical issue on my end, and I always know that when there's a little snag, it means it's going to be awesome. So
that's right.
we're ticking off the other team, and I'm happy about that.
Yep. Anytime we can make Satan a little grumpy to see our faces, that's fine by me.
Exactly.
Well, I'll just start off really quickly by reminding everybody what Uplift is about. We basically just are a listening ear. We are a shoulder to cry on. And if you're struggling with faith, or you know someone else who's struggling with their faith, that's where we really shine. And that's what our Uplift group is all about. There's so much out there that is providing negative experiences and information regarding faith that we want to be able to have positive things to refute some of that. So it's a great place for you to say, hey, I have a question. I ran into this hard doctrine. Can you point me in the right direction of something that will help me make sense of this? And that's where we shine. So I am so excited to have you today. I'll just tell everybody a little bit about you, if that's
Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Ganel-Lyn is a popular motivational speaker and content creator, known for inspiring and unique honesty, authenticity, and spirit. She is dedicated to her family, faith, and inspiring others through speaking and writing, empowering many towards living happier lives. She's experienced healing from a major chronic illness and is the mother of 2 miracle children. After the heartbreaking suicide of her 40-year-old sister, Ganel-Lyn constantly works towards suicide prevention. She's a regular video, radio, and podcast guest and hosts the popular show Real Talk CFM, Come Follow Me, and The Middle. Ganel-Lyn's talks and books have now encouraged thousands of people around the world, and she loves growing older with her cute husband. I love it.
Who we're about to celebrate our 30th anniversary, so in a few months. So
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I think in this world of intensity and coming from parents that were divorced, I take every chance I can to celebrate. We've worked hard to get to 30.
Yeah, that's exciting. I love it. Well, thank you for sharing your joy with us. So yeah, just tell us a little bit more about how you came to be the amazing Ganel-Lyn, and then share with us some of your story, if you will.
Well, I really appreciate this community and the work that Uplift is about, because it's so my jam. It's so my, the space I like to show up in. I host a couple of shows. The Middle is non-denominational on the Saints Unscripted channel. And I really appreciate inviting guests from all faiths and all walks of life to come to that space. The yellow couch, I'm wearing yellow today for a nod to my yellow couch, and my yellow chairs is on my other show, Real Talk Come Follow Me, which serves an LDS Latter-day Saint community. But I grew up in California, where I was the token back in the day Mormon. That's what we were known as. And I really was one of very few in my high school. And my friend group included all walks of faith, all racial denominations, all socioeconomic. And I often would visit other people's churches on Sunday. And I felt like that was such a gift for me. And it allowed me to wrestle from a very young age with hard questions. For a time, my mom was a single mom, as I referenced. She had been divorced, and we lived in an all-Black community. And she was a single mom of 2 little girls. And we were the only other Caucasian family was the gay couple across the street. So if you know nothing else about me, that explains pretty much everything about me. All of my friends were of color, and my sense of beauty was not what I saw in the mirror. My sense of beauty was what I saw around me. And that was such a gift for me. And I'm so grateful for a mother that really fostered a sense of, I think, the Christ-like example of being willing to love people right where they're at. but I will say that my faith is my everything. You know, when I was a young girl, I remember my dad saying, you really should grow up and go into sales. And I think that was a code word for I was a sassy pants. And I could, I could argue. I went on scholarship to college with debate. So if that tells you anything, I knew my faith and I loved my faith and I loved being asked questions about my faith. And I realized at a really young age, I couldn't sell anything except for me, God. And, not to get into priestcraft by any means, but what I create out there, I am on TV and radio, not talking about faith, but in the space of suicide prevention in the last 7 years since Meg died, I have come to understand that whether you're agnostic or atheist, something bigger than you is necessary. And in 12 step, they talk a lot about a higher power. And if you're atheist, you can be in 12 step. And so the invitation, if you're in 12 step, is to find something bigger than you. And for many, that might just mean that we believe in gravity. We believe that we're not going to float off this earth and that there's something bigger than us. And so for me, I define my faith as heavenly parents and a savior, right? So I'm a Christian, but I also have come to know, and I celebrate my 50th birthday on next Monday, February
happy
1st.
Birthday.
Thank you. And I've wrestled with some stuff. I mean, some of that was in my bio, but I kind of check a lot of the boxes of chronic illness and parents that were divorced and mental illness and infertility and faith questions and suicide grief. And I have another sister that died when I was 10 and she was 2. And so, I've raised teenagers. I'm currently raising a 17-year-old and I have a 23-year-old son who's navigating being a baby adult. That's what I call it. And so
I have one of those too.
Yeah. Listen, a warning out there. It is not for the faint of heart to parent adult children, because you're basically an influencer only when they ask you. That's it. Everything else is that, and I really believe parenting and everything that we're going to talk about today is a stewardship assignment. And to me, parenting is a stewardship assignment. If you've never married, that's a stewardship assignment. If you're LGBTQ, that's a stewardship assignment. And sometimes we place value on I want the stewardship assignment of writing books. I want the stewardship assignment of playing in the NBA. I want the stewardship assignment of, being very rich. Okay. But in our society, I believe everything is a stewardship assignment. And so through my stewardship assignments, I've come to know God. And I've wrestled with policy. There's, within our church identity, there's a culture, there's doctrine, there's policy, and there's the gospel of Christ, right? The church is the vehicle or the organization right now, but it will be dissolved in my faith when Jesus comes again, because that organization will change hands. He will be back and he will be leading. And I don't know about you, but 2020, I've increased my prayers of the second coming tenfold. And I think politically speaking, emotionally speaking, economically speaking, religiously speaking, we're all a little tapped out. We're all a little weary. Yeah. And if you've had a faith, some people don't love this term, but I think we all, if you're on the conversion path, you've likely had a faith crisis or a million faith crises, And so I believe the conversion path is very messy. And I believe the conversion path includes a lot of question asking. And I love Uplift because I believe it's a community, and the why that it was created was that there would be a safe space to wrestle with questions. I write about in one of my books, You Are Magnificent, to have faith friends. And my faith friends are the ones that have wrestled with questions, that have been disappointed by church leadership, that don't understand everything about church history, that sit in the paradoxes. And they're the people I go to when I find my space where I'm wrestling and I feel my heart walling off to God. And I feel like the grief has taken over, or the doubts have taken over, or the loneliness has taken over. And I feel a separation between myself and my heavenly parents. They're the bridge. They're the ones I go to, and I just have to speak it out loud and say, I'm not doing okay, and I read something, or I saw something, or I'm feeling something. Are you willing to sit with me in that? Those people, you don't have to have 10 of those. You need one, maybe two. And if you don't, I hope Uplift is that community for you, because the work you're doing here is saying, listen, stay in the boat, stay in the, I call the church the beaten up little red wagon, right? Where the wheels have fallen off and been put back on, and there's dents and the paint's chipped, but it's the place where I find my covenants. So I stay in the wagon. And too many of my friends that have made hard decisions to walk away from their faith, and I'm not just talking about the faith of the LDS church, but other faiths as well, have gone through a reckoning the last few years and wrestled with some big doctrinal policy issues. We're not the only church doing that. I've talked with those people. This is not a Sunday, Easter, Sunday, Christmas church, right? This is a culture. This is a tradition. This is family relationships. It's a really lonely process to walk away from faith. And there's a myriad of reasons why. And so I honor people that have said, I can't, for mental health reasons, for other doctrinal issues, I can't stay a Catholic, a Muslim, a Jew, a Jehovah's Witness, or a Mormon right now. I have to walk away. But I invite you, please find something bigger than you, even if you walk away from your church culture, because I don't know another way to do life, Roseanne. I don't know another way to do the infertility, the political unrest, the uncertainty with a pandemic, the loneliness that comes in our marriages, the struggles we have with our health, the choices our children make that, I tell college kids, listen, be patient with your parents. If they raised you Jewish and you decide to convert to Catholicism, they're not going to be happy about that, because they raised you Jewish for a reason. They believe in that faith and they want you to have that experience. LDS kids that are like, listen, I'm done. I served a mission and I'm done with this church. I say, you want your parents to just be okay with it. Well, they didn't drag you to every family home evening because they didn't believe in what they were giving you. And so when you are given a gift and you walk away from that, that hurts and that's painful. And so I think just this conversation we're going to have today, that was a long intro, but I hope it kind of gives a taste of my why and why I value hosting shows and posting on Instagram and writing books. It's because I value creating space to do what Uplift is doing, which is have the awkward conversations.
Yes.
I was telling my husband
so
yesterday,
needed.
We don't talk about, we teach each other culturally speaking in our culture as Americans to not talk about faith and sex and politics. Well, is it no surprise that we're wrestling with faith, politics, and sex right now on almost every level, right? And so we don't model how to have the awkward conversations. And my LGBT friends, man, oh man, they have changed me for the better, because many of them that are in and out of the church, right? Both. I have friends on all the spectrums, have taught me about sitting in the paradox, having the uncomfortable conversations. Yes. My friends of color, we've had honest, I put some of those out there publicly and I get the wrath sometimes because people on every side don't want me to sit on a yellow couch and have a conversation with someone because they don't agree with them politically. And I'm like, listen, I don't want to live in that world. I want to live, to me, Zion will be Leo and Roseanne and all my friends out there that register on all the different levels are in the same space. To me, Zion is going to be very diverse and heaven is going to be really big and expansive. Yes. It's not going to be so like this kind of person that looks this way and has this wreath on their door. Those are the people in Zion.
It's not going to go down like that at all. Yeah. And we need that diversity. We need every single voice for a reason. So he didn't make any mistakes when he put together our society, and each of us has uniqueness, right?
Right. Yeah. And he's teaching us to become like him. I'm learning it first and foremost in my family relationships, because those are the people that have to put up with my irritations when the mic didn't work, my frustrations when I can't show up the way I want and their junk shows up in my life. But but I'm also learning that in our communities, in our church communities, our work communities, our school communities, we become like God because people trigger us. That's the fastest way to become like him, is be with people. I think it's Elder Holland who said, Brad Wilcox shared this with me. And he said that Elder Holland spoke somewhere, and I think it was a devotional, where he said, we wouldn't need organized religion if we were all meditating on the top of a mountain by ourselves, right? Religion is needed because we're trying to have relationships with people that trigger us. That's my words, not Elder Holland's, right? And so my faith has helped me navigate. And sometimes my faith is my trigger, right? Like, to me, my relationship with God is just, it's another relationship I'm having. And one of the factors of our relationship is organized religion. It's just one factor, you know, it's not the only factor. But sometimes when we're struggling with a faith question, we make it the only thing about God and us, right? Is this policy change in the book, or this church leader that really bugs us because they're hyper focused on food storage and we could care less about food storage or whatever. That is, right?
Like President Nelson just said, we sometimes get myopic and we just zoom in on that one thing and we can't let it go, instead of realizing life is connectedness, you know, and he put us in those families to have those connectedness moments. So, you know, this kind of leads into everything that you've been through with your sister and that entire episode of your life and how you navigated that. So tell us what kind of happened when you lost your sister.
So I think it's really important to have some context, because all of my, all of the people that I have the opportunity through the stewardship of being a speaker and a public figure, I hear a lot of people's sacred stories, and all the ones that are very personal and intentionally difficult involve layers, you know? So when we talk about grief, or we talk about faith struggles, or we talk about whatever, we sometimes make it myopically about one thing, to use President Nelson's word, right? We make a faith crisis just about Joseph Smith and polygamy. I'm going to throw that out there, right? So before I dive into Meg's death and the aftershocks of that, I think it's important to know I was middle-aged. I'm still middle-aged. I don't know if when you're 50, Roseanne, are you still middle-aged? I don't know.
I don't know either.
Okay. It was 7 years ago. So I was definitely middle age. And part of the reason why Saints Unscripted, the foundation, invited me to host the middle is I had guested on Saints, and I'm so middle-aged. And so the play on the words of the show is that I'm middle-aged and we're all in the middle of stuff. And so in the middle of this time of my life, middle-age in a predominant neighborhood of not middle age factors into the story. Okay. So I was in a ward where I had, my husband and I had been teaching, the 16 to 18-year-olds in Sunday school. Come Follow Me had kind of just been starting as a new manual. It wasn't what it is now. Right. And we had 26 of them, and it was awesome. And our son was a senior, and he was wrestling. I jokingly say, he knows I do joke about this, that he was either going to go to prison or become the prophet. I wasn't sure.
I love it.
I wasn't sure which it was going to be. It could have gone either way. And any parent of a junior or a senior in high school understands exactly what I'm talking about. You know, you feel like you're almost crossing some imaginary finish line, and they're really in the age group 16, 18 of questioning everything. Do they believe it because their parents believe it? And, you know, and it's such a unique time. And so we were dealing with that. Okay. The other part of the context is we were currently underemployed, and we had gone through unemployment, but underemployment is even more crazy because people think you have a job, but you're barely making it. And we were living in a neighborhood, we still are, where the median age was more in the 30s, and we're approaching 50. And we have a huge primary. Our youth program is now growing, but at the time the ward split. Now listen, I am a fan of the ward split. I'm a fan of it, because it's a sign that the kingdom of God is growing on the planet.
Yeah.
But sometimes word splits rock your world because of whatever the context of your life is. And I think it's important to note that the teaching of this Sunday school class with our kid in it and the way we were doing it was also during the time of the policy handbook change that created a huge issue in the church. So we had kids that were asking really hard questions. We had a Preach My Gospel group that met every Sunday in our home with 45 teenagers that would show up across the valley. We really loved these kids and they asked the hard questions. And our son, I think it helped him because other teenagers were responding to us and he was like, oh, maybe my parents aren't such wackadoodles, you know, like maybe they know something, right? But we were underemployed and we were living in a neighborhood where money was more, I mean, it's not unusual in our neighborhood for people to just go to Hawaii, you know, like just, so if that gives context, okay. And we have a ward split where all the youth is put in the other ward. Out of those 26, 3, including our son, is in the new ward. So now our ward is so young. We were the old ones. We had one of the 2 seniors in the whole ward.
Wow.
And he was navigating all the hard questions. And I like to go to Relief Society and have women ahead of me on the trail raise their hand. Like I very much value.
Yes.
I value when people say, hey, listen, I'm a grandma and this is what's happened. And they make a comment because usually they answer my prayer that week. And I get through, 6 more days of wrestling with raising teenagers and let me just be straight. Middle age, I love getting older. I love that I'm turning 50 because 48 and 49 is just dumb. It's like, you're not even, you're like in Middle Earth of Lord of the Rings. You're not even, just be 50 already. Like, I just want to be 50. So when I say this, I don't mind getting older. I have braces on right now for like 3 more weeks. So everyone's like, you don't look 50. I'm like, it's just my braces. My braces make me look younger. But I'm going to say getting older when there's a lot of youth around you sometimes feels as a woman, I'm just going to say, there's changes and society as a whole isn't like, man, you're the coolest, hottest thing walking around. Like I was wrestling with some of that and Meg had died. And the grief of Meg dying was like no other kind of grief. Like I had lost my grandparents who, like, I was holding my grandma in bed when she died. That's how close we were. And my father-in-law died of MS. And my little sister had died when I was 10 and she was 2. I had grieved before. But this grief on top of underemployment, on top of middle age, on top of a ward split, on top of a teenager that was wrestling, like, is he going to go on a mission? Is he going to go to college? What is he going to do? All those crazies. And I was weary. I was so weary. And for the first time, that Sunday school class was gone. And I knew that in the wake of Meg's suicide, I had a place to be every Sunday. And I had 26 teenagers asking hard questions. And I would say sex randomly in Sunday school all the time. And they just thought I was the coolest teacher because I would say sex randomly, like they, and all the other teachers in the stake were like, why do you? Afraid I wasn't afraid. And my husband and I were filled by these kids that were wrestling with how they felt and what their beliefs were and what they saw themselves doing in their life in the society that we were living in. And they kept me going forward through the grief because I'm going to be honest with you. Suicide grief is a crazy what if grief. It is a crazy, listen, I've given over maybe 1,300 keynotes in 7 years. And everyone I have spoke to, groups all over the world, church groups, school groups, corporate groups, all of us either struggle with depression, anxiety, love someone that does, or have lost someone. That's literally everyone on the planet. So when we talk about suicide and we make it about this special group of people, I don't know who that group of people is. And especially after the pandemic, the numbers are staggering, like 1,000% increase into suicide hotlines right now, Roseanne, 1,000%. I mean,
I totally believe it. I actually went through this with a family member during the COVID thing, and it was just a shock. It opened my eyes. It was incredibly painful. Yeah.
And helpers are needing help right now. Like all my friends that are therapists are back in therapy, you know, and I feel like I had worked through all my crud. The pandemic hit, not to go on a side note here, but I feel like all my issues showed up on the front door and rang the doorbell and said, hey, we heard there's a pandemic and your college kid is like working from home now, and your husband's not sure about his job, and your daughter now has online schooling, and all your speaking events have converted to like this. Like I've had
Zoom,
to get good on my earrings and my lipstick because no one sees my pants and my shoes anymore, right? And so my world had changed and everyone's stuff showed up. So I'm going to say to you that mental health is a topic that we're doing better at talking about, but it's complex. So I don't want to oversimplify when I speak, especially in school groups. I say, listen, I don't have the magic answer. When Meg died, everyone asked me why, because I'm the oldest in my family. My parents had gone through a divorce. Meg and I had been like this. Like I was more her mama than just her big sister. And she believed in me. Like she loved me with that love of like, I know all your junk and you're still the coolest person on the planet. If you have one person that thinks that of you, you know, you can do what you came to earth to do. And she was that for me. And I knew her story. I knew she had dealt with depression, anxiety, a learning disability. She had been sexually abused. I had gone through life with her. And when she died, it was my worst nightmare. You know, I mean, I have a few other nightmares that haven't happened, but I had already had a lot of them. They had all really happened. And so if you meet someone that's gone through trauma and we try to oversimplify faith crises, we need to get really sensitive about the fact that we're living a very mortal experience, including some intense trauma. And so at the moment of the ward split, that was kind of a straw. I was just like, who's going to see my pain? Because for the first time, Roseanne, I was like, I mean, I've been Relief Society president. I've been in the stake Relief Society presidency. I've been primary president. I mean, there was not a lot. I have gone through offense with church leadership that was enough to push people out. You know, when I tell stories, people are like, how did you forgive? You know? But this was the first time I was like, oh, I don't really want to go to church. I don't really want to hear about what at the time, I'm not trying to offend anyone, felt like in the thick of thin things where people would get really stressed about. I was like, what? I'm not saying people weren't having issues. I just felt like comments in church or lessons given or talks given, I was numb. The grief was overwhelming. Because what had played out was I had helped Meg out of her pit many times. So after planning her funeral and literally burying her, I literally took her ashes and put them in the ground and spoke at her funeral. I was like, okay, I guess I don't have any control over stopping anything bad ever happening. And as a perfectionist in recovery, that was rocked my world. And now I was going to church where half the ward of the people that would be there, that knew me, that loved me, that had walked through stuff themselves, they were in the other ward. And I live in Utah where that's literally 3 streets away, but you might as well be in Nebraska. I don't see them anymore, you know? And all of a sudden I felt very lost. And I felt very much like my first book was about to come out that year. And that kind of saved me because it felt like a way in which I could show up and have the awkward conversations and put something out there that wasn't really, I mean, 7 years ago, there weren't the conversations and books written about the topics in my first book. And it was 18 chapters of all the stuff: bipolar, divorce, infertility, death of a child, suicide, you know, all the things, faith crisis, all the things. And now we luckily have some of those things to buy now, but people weren't having that conversation. And so I had a why, but it was hard. And then I'm going to tell you this, my patriarchal blessing, you know, there's this one line, and I've talked about it publicly, that says that I will accept all callings.
Oh man. Oh man.
Roseanne, that doesn't feel like agency, but listen, I was like, all callings? Okay, all callings. Now I have had one calling in the past that, and I believe in this.
Mm-hmm.
These are mortals that are imperfect, that are praying about callings and extending callings.
Absolutely.
Okay? Yeah. So some of the pain that we carry from year to year in the church is that we say yes to things that we don't really want to say yes to, or we trust leadership that they prayed and they checked all the boxes. And God trusts us with a very long rope to mess things up. That's what I will say. But I've learned that if I counsel with leadership, then inspiration is based on revelation and information, not just inspiration is based on revelation. It's information, right?
Yes. Information breeds revelation.
Yes.
I believe that 100%.
So I did have a calling, newly married, where I needed to give information to the counselor extending the calling that I didn't have a car. And so I asked for an adjustment to the calling because I didn't see how I was going to serve as the young women's counselor versus the young women's advisor back in the day, 30 years ago. Right. So I believe in sharing information when leaders are trying to get revelation. But there's this line in my patriarchal blessing, and it's specific. It's not like there's no gray about it. So cute Brother Bell, who I can see his house from my office window right now, but he's one of those great young, happy young dads with all these smiley blonde children. And he's just wonderful. But he was in this brand new bishopric in this brand new ward. And he called me, and it was around Christmas time. Meg had died in March. So that tells you how many months. We're still in the first year. And it's the first Christmas, And he said, Sister Condie, can I meet with you? And I should have just said, well, whatever the calling is, Heavenly Father already said I had to say yes. So, but I didn't. Now listen, full disclosure, there's only 2 callings in the whole church that I'm just like,
no, thanks.
No, thanks. I want to be a Methodist instead of covenanting. Now, my step grandma was a Methodist. So I have full, firsthand knowledge of how cool the Methodists are. They, back before the pandemic, I don't know if they're still doing it, but her Methodist congregation every Sunday had donuts and hot chocolate and cribs in the nursery for the kids to take a nap.
That's beautiful.
Roseanne,
man.
We would have 100% attendance in church if we had donuts, hot chocolate, and cribs. Am I right?
Yeah. Okay. You're on there.
Right. So anyways, I'm just joking, but not really joking that there's 2 callings. One of the callings is organist, because that would be so hard. I don't know how organists do it. It's a lost art to me. I'm not talking the keyboard where you push the play and then it plays the song and we all sing.
Right. Yeah.
The feet, the hands, the things. To me, that's like superpower. That's like superpower.
Yeah.
So that's one calling. The other calling, this is where we insert, Leo, the dun 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 music. So there's this one other calling, and I'm about to tell you what happens with cute Brother Bell. So cute Brother Bell is in the bishopric, and he's extending the calling to me, and he won't look me in the eye. He's so nervous. And I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good if he won't even look me in the eye. Because I think, generally speaking, I think he knew that I was willing to do whatever God needed me to do. I mean, I want to be the librarian, and I've never had that calling. And so I hope one day I finally get that calling, because to me, that's the dream calling, to talk to people and organize. But I've never had that calling. So I think he knew, I would straighten the hymn books. I would empty the garbage cans. I'm old enough now. I don't believe in building the kingdom because there's certain callings that you all aspire to. I don't even want those callings.
Yes.
I don't want that. Yeah.
I'll clean out the broom closet.
Yes.
Let me do that. Yeah.
Yes.
100%.
So I really feel that way. I want to build the kingdom wherever God, right now it looks this way, but I'll do whatever he wants. So I was surprised he was nervous, because I think he knows that enough about me that he knows I'm I say yes, I work, and I'll be honest with you, and I'll tell you if it's going to be an issue, but I'm willing to take anything. So he's not looking at me, and he's like, Sister Condie, and he's whispering, Sister Condie, and he's looking down like this. We'd like to call you. Tyler, if you're watching, he knows I tell this story, because sometimes people stop him and say, are you the Brother Bell that Ganel-Lyn's talking about?
Are you the guy?
He's like, we'd like to call you to be primary chorister.
Ooh.
Now listen.
Oh, that's a tough one.
before everybody starts messaging me. This is that other calling.
Yeah.
Okay. Now listen, I don't have a cussing problem. It's not that I don't think them, but in that moment I was like, what the bleep in my head, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like, what is God even thinking? Listen, I can speak to 1,000 people. I've done that. I don't even get nervous. It's not my wrestle with God in nerves is before I get to the podium. It's not once I'm there. To me, it's a sacred dance to speak and be in front. I have been primary president. I know the most important calling in the entire church, in my opinion, is primary chorister.
Yes.
That's how important it is.
Yes.
It is like, Roseanne, as primary president, right? Like it saves everything. Back before the pandemic, if you're losing the spirit, all you have to do is turn to your chorister and say, it's you the rest of the time.
Yeah.
Back in the day, we used to have to do all these things like laminate and puppets and posters. That is not my skill. I'm not good at singing the right words and leading the music. My husband has had this calling and he's brilliant at it. And so all of a sudden I was like, what? Like, what do you know? So I look at Brother Bell and he goes, yeah, we were shocked too. I was like, what do you mean you're shocked? You're supposed to tell me that angels came to the bishop's office and told you to call Sister Condie. Yeah. You're not supposed to tell me that you're shocked. So I said yes, but I didn't feel yes. And immediately I had hives breaking out all over me and I was a mess. I get to my car, I break down. I have a nervous breakdown. I call my best friend. She said the cuss word that I was thinking. She was like, what? Why are they calling you to that? So back in the day, I was like, listen, I know what my patriarchal blessing says, but I went home and reviewed it. I was like, does it really say this? Yes, it really said it. And so I got myself to the temple because I knew that in the wake of Meg's death, when I was wrestling with raising a teenager, all the unemployment, all the chronic illness, all the infertility, all the stuff, I could go to the temple. And even if I didn't come out better or different, I felt peace. I felt like the temple helps me see beyond my immediate. It gives me a timeline that's eternal. That's all I can describe it as. And I also believe that angels come home with you, and I could feel that. So I got myself to the temple because I was losing my mind. Like, I want to be a Methodist. I do not want to covenant all of myself. And I must have scared all the temple workers that day because I did the ugly cry through the whole thing. Like, I was just like, I was in initiatories. And a few temple workers were just like, sister, can I help you? And I'm like, no, because I don't want to tell them it's not cancer. It's not a divorce. My kid's not in prison. They want me to be the primary chorister. I can't tell anyone that. That seems ridiculous. Right? So I go to the temple. Roseanne, I don't come home feeling peaceful. I read scriptures. I don't feel peaceful. I get a blessing from my husband. This is 2 days of me wrestling with God. I call the primary president that Sunday morning. I'm supposed to be sustained. And she answers the phone. She's like, hey. And I was like, Brittany. She's like, are you calling about your calling? I'm like, yeah. What are you thinking? She's like, I know. You don't know anything about music. I'm like, ding, ding, ding. I said, so what? What is your deal? Like, put me in. I love sunbeams. I'll teach sunbeams till the sun come home. She's like, listen, I know you don't know anything about music, but I need someone that loves the gospel and loves these babies. And I'm thinking, then call me to be the primary love angel. I'll just go around saying, Jesus loves you. I love you. Jesus loves you. I love you, to all of them every Sunday. And she's like, well, listen, if you don't feel good about it, I said, no, it's fine. My patriarchal blessing says, so I go to church. Of course, my husband, who you saw in the bio, is cute and I love him, but he chooses to sit on the second row of church that day. I was like, what are you doing? Because the bishop can totally see me. And I have hives all over my neck from stress. I've been crying for 3 days. So my eyes are puffy and I am so not feeling the spirit. And all the things that we check on the boxes, read your scriptures, get a blessing, go to the temple, counsel with your faith friends, right? All those things I had done, I didn't feel peace. And I was so scared that I was going to mess up these kids. Janice Perry's a friend of mine. And I called her. I was like, Janice, I can't do this. And I had written a book with her about her writing her first songs. And anyways, so I said, I can't do justice to your songs. Like if you talk to someone that grew up in the church and they sing, Heavenly Father, are you really there? And do you hear and answer every child's prayer? You can still feel that. Even if you've walked away, that's where testimony's built. That's how important primary songs are. And that is so, to me, where Christ would go if he showed up at church on Sunday, he'd go straight to the primary room. So these are the most important people in the ward. I don't care about the stake president. I care about the valiant tens, And so I felt this pressure. And so we were getting ready for sacrament. And I'm sorry, the story's so long, but every time I tell it, I get letters from people saying, that's exactly. So I hope the Spirit is answering a prayer. That's my prayer in sharing this story. We have gluten-free, nut-free, air-free, sugar-free bread in our ward. I joke, but it was literally the free of the everything. And so my son was one of the two priests. There was only two left in the ward. And he was at the sacrament table, and the total gluten-free bread was just very tiny. And we saw someone run in at sacrament and throw this like package of bread. So sacrament had already started. You've been through that when they forgot the bread. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, they just forgot part of the bread, the gluten-free part. And I didn't realize they literally threw my son one square of bread for the whole ward that day. Ooh, I didn't know that. Yeah. So the sacrament comes, and I've gone to the temple, read my scriptures, gotten a blessing, said my prayers. I've done all those things. I'm still grieving. I feel the grief in my bones from Meg's death. Like that's the best way I can describe it, in my bones. If you look at Lehi and Sarah on the boat, they were dying because of grief. When the whole storm was happening, they were on their deathbed because of grief over their sons and what was happening. So the grief was in my bones, and I was getting through the day, taking care of my kids. But this calling, I was committed to writing my next book. I was working. I was trying to just show up. And I was like, I don't have a brain cell left. Like there's not a brain cell left. I'm trying to like keep myself alive because I have a chronic illness with a heart condition. I have a teenage son. I'm trying to help graduate from college. I'm trying to write this next book and speak and raise my daughter so she doesn't do drugs. And I don't have any more brain cells to do this calling. That's the most important calling. And I don't feel peaceful. I know there's Pinterest boards galore that are going to tell me to laminate everything and be the greatest primary chorister in the planet. I don't know where I'm going to pull that from. There's nothing left of me. And that's where I was at when the bread came that day. Now, mind you, I didn't know what had happened with the sacrament bread, and the tray comes, and the pieces of bread are so tiny, Roseanne, I can barely pick them up. And I go to take the piece of bread, and I hear, I know you're tired, and I know you have nothing left to give. But with me, it will be enough. It was so audible, and I don't always get revelation that way, but it was a voice in my heart and in my head. I could hear it both places. And I knew that crumb of bread was all I had. I didn't have anything more to give. I was so spent. And so I took that piece of bread, and for the first time in all of the praying and all the wrestling and all the cussing to my best friend and going to the temple and getting a blessing and reading my patriarchal blessing, the peace I found was in my covenant to take the sacrament. And when the sacrament was over, I found out later that my son had been given literally like one piece of bread for the whole ward. And I said, why didn't you panic? Because he was like total poker face. He said, I thought of the fishes and the loaves, and I started to pray that it would be enough. Well, after sacrament, I composed myself, and the bishopric could see that I had completely like ballistic lost it in sacrament. What they didn't know is I had lost it with the peace of the Spirit of Christ. I hadn't lost it the way I had been losing it for 2 days previous. Mm-hmm. And Brother Bell came to me and he said, Sister Condie, we made a mistake. I'm almost done with the story. We made a mistake. I said, what do you mean we made a mistake? He said, we didn't read the whole handbook. We were supposed to vet you and find out about your musical training. And I said, oh, he says, so we're willing to take the calling back. But Roseanne, I had had this experience with Christ. Mm-hmm. Like my brother had shown up in the sacrament that day, and he had promised me that he would make up the difference. And so I said to Brother Bell, oh no, we're doing this, dude. Like I'm all in. I'm all in. And I said to him, I witnessed to him, I said, I don't know what's going to happen with my son. But in the next year, he may find himself in another part of the world doing something really scary. My kids have never seen me this scared. They know I'm wigging out. They know I'm scared. And I want my son to remember that with Christ, I can do this because he's going to be scared someday. And I want him to know his mom did something really scary. Now, people are going to laugh that love the calling of primary chorister, that it scared me so badly, but it really did. It was not where I felt comfortable. And Roseanne, I'm going to testify in the next few months, I spent that first few months, 90 hours a week prepping for primary because I was just like, I don't know how to sing. I don't know the words. I don't know how to teach them words. I don't know how to do this, but I loved those babies, and those babies loved me back to feeling like I could feel. I finished the book. We didn't get a divorce. My daughter didn't start doing drugs. My son graduated high school. And just about a month before I was released, I woke up one Saturday morning and thought, I don't have to prep. I think I can just go to primary tomorrow and do this. Yeah. And that's about the time I got a call from the stake that we were being released, right? Like it never fails. He never fails. He wants us to be uncomfortable so that we can learn to walk on water with him. And I'm going to tell you, I never, Roseanne, became the best Pinterest primary chorister. Never. The last Sunday I was in primary leading the music, the back row kids, remember, they were the 11-year-olds. Now they're 10, but they used to be 11, right? And they were sick of primary, right? Every primary president knows what I'm talking about when the kids are like ready to go to the youth programs and they're sick of primary because it's all babies. Yep. So I had put that group in charge of watching Sister Condie and coaching me on how to lead the music in the back. And so the last Sunday comes, they know I'm being released and I'm a mess. Now I'm crying because I love them so much. And my soul has been healed in primary. And they gave me the choice of the last song to sing. And I said, we're going to sing my favorite, Heavenly Father, Are You Really There? And we all cried. The whole primary, all the kids are crying. I'm crying and I'm leading. And Roseanne, I messed up. I still did not know how to lead the stinking music the right way. And those babies in the back, were laughing and crying. And I'm just here to testify that the Savior keeps his promise. He has felt every fear, every doubt, every wrestle. I'm not trying to oversimplify depression, addiction, divorce. I'm not trying to oversimplify faith questions and church history concerns or policy issues. I'm not trying to oversimplify sexual identity, gender identity issues. I'm not. I'm just here to say to you that that's one sacred experience that I have revisited many times in the last 7 years, that God does ask a lot of us at times. He does ask us to show up and be uncomfortable, but he has never asked us to do that alone. And I'm going to tell you that that didn't make learning the calling, finishing the book, raising the kid easier. I am here to say that with our willing hearts, as President Nelson says, God will prevail.
Absolutely.
And when we're uncomfortable, we are setting ourselves up for the greatest miracle. And maybe that doesn't feel like a miraculous story, but I've shared it a number of times the last few years. And I've had people come back to me saying that when I share that story, the prompting of the thing that's been on their heart to do that feels uncomfortable, it pushes them to do it. And they've come back to say, it wasn't primary, it was this other thing. It was starting a blog, it was writing a book, it was, reaching out to a neighbor, it was changing jobs, going back to college, whatever, that they have learned in that sharing, which is why we have faith sharing story opportunities like the Uplift community, to just show up. And I kept showing up every Sunday, and I would invite those that can have access to the sacrament, if you can still participate in that ordinance, to not underestimate the power of the sacrament, because that is an intimate, think about it, body and blood of Christ inside of us. And we do it out of like habit now. I mean, I think the pandemic has helped us readjust that. We don't take it for granted maybe as much as we did a year ago, but so often we just like take the bread, drink the water, take the bread, drink the water. And I really have in the last few years tried to stop since that experience, and every week reflect on where I need Christ, where my offering is a crumb, and where I need him to show up. And when I take the bread and the water, I try to renew the idea that Christ is always with me. He's never going to force me to hang out with him, but he's always willing to hang out with me. And that's my testimony. That boy did go serve a scary mission in Africa, and now he's been home 2 years, and he's wrestling with some big decisions. And today when I took the sacrament, I had prayers, new ones, where I don't feel enough, where I feel spent, where I feel weary. And once again, I didn't have that audible voice, but I felt that renewal of the covenant of the Spirit, of God saying, I'm with you, I will walk with you, I will not leave you alone, and I know you're tired, and I know you're not enough, and I'm enough for both of us.
I have to say, before I had this interview with you, right before, I had a prayer. And in that prayer, I felt a powerful spirit just kind of come over me that this would be a very powerful experience for myself. And I wasn't really expecting that, but you, in your story, have said almost mirror to the stories that I have been through. And it blows me away that we can see these things happen over and over. It's something I feel so intimately as my own. And to hear you're telling my story, and I'm just like, it's so amazing. And you're going to see that there are people out there that'll say, you know what? Why are you in a church that calls you to sacrifice like that? What is it about your church that sacrifice is a good thing for you? What does it do for you? What are all this time spent? Well, how are you not just a robot capitulating to this oppressive system of rules? And it's moments like this that people, until you've felt it, until you have gone all in and you didn't feel enough and you didn't think it was going to work out and you just tried it out, and then things started to make sense. And it sometimes takes a long time.
Yeah, and I think that we have improved as a culture in the church of having information for revelation. And I think it's so crucial that we see all of our stewardship assignments, that God doesn't value the stake president above the mother trying to teach her autistic child to read. He doesn't. In the economy of God, it is not more sacred to serve as a temple worker than it is to serve as a Sunbeam teacher. It's not. And I think that's why mission presidents can go from mission president to Sunbeam teacher, right?
Yeah.
Right. But so I think it's so crucial that we take ownership over our stewardships, and we say to a bishop or a stake president or anyone, a young women's president or relief study president, whoever is extending a call, this is where I'm at. But I think so often we run, all of us as humans, from what's hard. We don't. We don't want to be uncomfortable. I mean, I just read in Reader's Digest, my daughter just shared this with me, that buffaloes and cows, if you were to guess who spends less time standing in a storm, it's the buffalo, because the buffalo turn and run into storms. So the storms fall and pass over. Cows run from a storm. And so they end up spending way more time in a storm because they're running away from it and it's following them. Mm-hmm. And I think oftentimes we get a calling and they're uncomfortable and we serve with people we don't like. And we have stories in our heads about, why is God asking one more thing of me? And I think it's so crucial that you are honest with your leaders and say, this is where my parameters are, but there is no sanctification without sacrifice. It's an eternal law. And so much that's predicated upon God blessing us is, are we willing to let go of something for something more? That's all that covenant keeping is. That's all that marriage is. I don't wake up every day madly in love. Like, we've chosen into that, right? And we've said no to other things so we can preserve this union. Mm-hmm. Motherhood. I have a friend that just had her very first baby this week. And we have spent 9 months processing, right? And I kept saying to her, there's no way for me to explain to you on any level what will literally, the fabric of your being will change. Yes. The minute you go through, literally walking through the valley of death. Mm-hmm. And she did have a really excruciating emergency C-section. It wasn't the way she planned. And I just was able to communicate with her yesterday, and we both just cried because I told her more of my birth story. And she's like, I didn't even know. And I said, women are amazing. Women are amazing. I don't know. I think there's no other signal to the world that Satan is scared of us than he makes us think that we're not doing anything of value if we choose to be a mom. I mean, he is full send on attack on that. And there are so many, listen, 7 years of infertility to have my son, 6 years to have my daughter. So I know there are people out there that are mother and father hearts that haven't had that gift. And I want to be sensitive to that. Because some of those individuals are my dearest friends and have been there for me. I always joke that they already know everything that the Lord is trying to beat inside of me for, they don't have to go through it in this life. But I will just say that sacrifice brings sanctification, and it's just an eternal law. And I think if we want a blessing, it's usually predicated on some commandment or sacrifice. And that's God's wisdom. He doesn't always make it easy. Let me just say that. And thank goodness, because usually the hardest things, once I'm through the storm, like the buffalo, when I look back, I go, oh, that was such a gift. When I'm in it, not so much.
Not so much.
No.
Totally understand that. And that concept even transfers into the secular world, where you're talking about people growing their businesses and things like that. There's every time that our business would buy another $60,000 machine or whatever, it was always like, there's these big risks. There's this big sacrifice. There's this big worry. And those things don't happen unless you try them out. You've got to go get your hands dirty. You've got to go all in on some of those things. So
I know our time is probably ending, but I felt prompted to share this. On the middle, I was able to interview Dallas Jenkins, who's the creator of The Chosen.
The Chosen. That's so exciting.
And it was one of the highlights for me interview-wise. I've interviewed some amazing people, but I'm a huge Chosen fan. And I told Dallas Jenkins that the Jesus of The Chosen is my Jesus, and it's the Jesus I've talked about for years. And at the end, if people are familiar with the middle, they already know I ask all my guests the same question at the end: what's your manna? And when I asked Dallas this, it goes exactly with what you just said, Roseanne. On growing a business or whatever. It's the manna principle he talked about. He said, I live by the manna principle. He said, the first season of The Chosen was this huge hit. But I don't get to decide whether or not my fish and loaf offering is going to feed 5,000. I just get to decide if I'm going to offer the fish and the loaf. And he said, my computer doesn't care that season 1 was a hit. I still have to write 7 more seasons of the chosen. And so
Mm-hmm.
he said, honestly, I try not to get too caught up into the praise he gets every day and the criticism he gets every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
He gets a lot of
Yeah.
criticism from
Oh yeah.
evangelicals that he's too Mormon, and from Mormons that he's too evangelical, right?
Right.
And he says, I just show up and try to do the offering. And he said, honestly, for the first time, Here's the Chosen season 1 has been this huge, massive hit. He said,
Mm-hmm.
we've gone into debt for the first time as a family. We've struggled more than ever. And I think that principle of resiliency is so crucial. And then just before we say goodbye to each other, those that are listening, I know in your audience, because I know in the work that I've done that there are many struggling with depression and anxiety. And oftentimes that depression and anxiety, this week's episode of Real Talk talks about this, that depression can be a screen between you and God, where the depression filters out the spirit. And so you're not having these miraculous fasting, praying, temple, sacrament, miracle stories where God talks to you, because you're fighting with the stewardship assignment of depression. And so I want to just acknowledge that the muscle of personal revelation and hearing God in your life and feeling the Spirit minister to you is sometimes complicated when you're dealing with illness or depression or anxiety. And so that's where I think groups like Uplift, Faith Friends are really helpful, because, or me, for me, music. When I listen to music, when I can't feel anything, I know I can put on some good Christmas music or some
Yeah.
good Come Follow Me, usually some Come Thou Font, or
Oh
some,
yeah.
some music that fills the spirit in a way that my heart can recognize. And so for those dealing with depression and anxiety, I hope you know that we need you. We need
Mm-hmm.
what your fight has taught you, and we need the muscles you've built through the depression and anxiety over the years. If you are like my sister Meg, who I still see as a mission companion on the other side, um, she would have me say to you, stay in your body, because we need you. And
Mm-hmm.
what's coming before Jesus comes, there will be new crops of people that have never dealt with depression and anxiety, that will be face first in the ground, dealing with it on a debilitating level. And you will be the manna for them that day. You will be the one that answers a prayer because you've been there. And
Mm-hmm.
so I want a word. My dream word is so diverse, and all these life experiences, and my LGBT friends show up, and my friends of color, my friends of other faith, and my friends with depression and anxiety, my friends that have recovered or are fighting addiction show up and raise their hand in Sunday school and say, this is the Jesus I know. This is the Jesus
Mm-hmm.
I have found sitting in my paradoxes. That's the ward of Zion to me. That's the church of Zion, where
Yeah.
we bring all of our stuff and our wrestles and our questions of doubt and our triggers with church history, and we show up for
Mm-hmm.
each other. And it's messy and it's beautiful.
I totally agree, and I couldn't have said that better. So we'll just go ahead and wrap up here. Is there anything left that you would like to leave us with as far as your testimony, or of anything that we haven't yet discussed here? Because I know for me, you have hit every single thing that I was hoping to talk about. Is there any resources or books that you even recommend?
Well, I've tried to write books and create content that I feel like embodies what we've talked about today. But I do feel like there is power in one verse of scripture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my co-host on Real Talk, Scott Sorensen, is a seminary teacher, and he deals with severe depression and anxiety. And he talks about a time where I think it was his senior year, his parents would read the Book of Mormon with him. He says, I don't remember one verse from that year, but I remember the changes that happened in my heart and soul. And I know the DNC this year, if you're a member of the church and you're doing Come Follow Me, it's triggering. We started this second season of Real Talk by saying, for me, the story of Joseph Smith is a story of a very flawed, human, willing prophet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a story of a young man that went into a grove of trees, that faced and fought the adversary there.
Yeah.
And because his willingness to fight, he did have a visitation. And to me, the story of Joseph is a story for each of us to have our own sacred grove revelatory relationship. So I hope that in the deep dive into the D&C, if it doesn't feel the same as the New Testament or the Book of Mormon does, there's a ton of Come Follow Me resources out there, and we love all of them. Scott and I, when they came to us at Seagull Covenant and said, do you want to start one? We're like, really? Because every corner has like a Burger King, a McDonald's, a Carl's Jr., and a Wendy's.
Right. Yeah.
So, we value doing it in the way we do it, which is 20 minutes where we talk about the real stuff. We have Friends episodes that are a little longer. We've had Brad Wilcox and Tim Ballard and Anthony Sweat and others that we go longer, but our weekly Come Follow Me, we don't avoid the hard conversations. And to me, the D&C is one part of the elephant of seeing God. It's not the whole elephant, right? The Book of Mormon shows us the trunk, and the New Testament shows us the tail, and the D&C maybe shows us the foot of God. But what I think is so hopeful about the D&C is an invitation for us to have a sacred grove revelatory experience every day, which means we face the dark. Think about that. It was first the dark, then the light came. And Joseph didn't leave that grove with all the boxes checked. He didn't have all the answers. What if he had sat down and said, I asked you this, this, and this, and this, and you only answered 2 out of the 5. Forget it, I'm done.
Right.
So I guess in closing, my invitation is find your own sacred grove. Is it a corner in your closet? Is it a place in your room? Is it a place where you can go today, tonight, and show up and say, hey, this lady, she has a weird name. It's Ganel something. And she was going on and on about primary and crying and her kids. She said to have a sacred grove, literally tell God, I'm going to use this chair, this desk, this corner. I promise God, I'll show up here every morning and I'll show up there every night. I promise if you do that for 2 weeks, it won't take 2 weeks. But if you do it for 2 weeks, every morning and every night, and you tell God you're willing to show up, he'll show up every time. It will get to the point where you'll look at the chair and you'll feel the Spirit, because you'll know that's where you wrestle. And conversion is messy. Nephi saw the same things that Laman and Lemuel did. And we're all Laman and Lemuel. We're all Nephi. It's not us against them. It's not believers and non-believers.
It's all within each of us. Yeah.
All of us. But Laman and Lemuel saw those angels too. They weren't willing to have the messy walk of conversion. And it's messy. So that's my closing invitation is find your sacred grove, show up there. God will trust that if you show up, he'll show up. And maybe he shows up not the way you think. Like so often, I want the answer right there when I'm reading my scriptures and I'm journaling. And it's usually I say amen. I feel flat. I don't get the answer. I don't get the answer to the question that I've fasted about 5 times. And then I get up and an hour later, I get a phone call, or I hear a broadcast like this, or I read a message from conference that finally answers the question. So that's my invitation, Roseanne, is that we find our own sacred groves this year, that we don't get so caught in the weeds of this part of church history. And I'm not oversimplifying it, because I had to write a journal to go with the D&C this summer. And I took a deep dive, and it's a web and it's complicated. But what is hopeful for me about the D&C is that it invites, Joseph was inviting all the members of the church to have a sacred grove experience. He never once wanted us to rest on his experience. Right. He wanted us to have our own. And that's my invitation, that we do that. And I don't know what that's going to always look like. Some days it looks beautiful and some days it looks flat. But I hope that you have full permission, Roseanne, to message me and kick me in the tail if I decide to quit and sit down on the side of the road and say, I'm too tired. I don't want to keep going. My favorite miracle in 17 miracles, T.C. Christensen's become a good buddy of mine. And I told him it saved me after Meg, was the mom that sat down on the side of the road and said, I'm done. Yeah. I can't go. And then God said, classic, how about a big pot pie? And then the pot, right? And if you know the story in the movie, her daughter wouldn't leave her. And she sat down and she had that miracle where the food was provided and it gave her nourishment. She didn't get a special helicopter all the way to Salt Lake Valley after that. She still had to walk with bloody feet to get there. And TC told me personally, he said that the cool thing about that miracle is that woman, we don't see it in the movie. She had lost twins. She had buried twins. We don't see all the reasons why she was so done and ready to give up. We just see this moment where she was like, I'm done. And I love that a faith friend, her daughter said, I'm not leaving you, Mom. And then this miracle happens and she had to keep remembering the miracle. You know, she still had to walk. She was still tired. And friends, I'm tired too. I just said to my husband yesterday, oh man, am I going to make it? Am I gonna make it? And he said, I promise I'll kick you if you need kicking, and you kick me if I need kicking. That's what Zion is. And that's why I love Uplift. I love this community. I love having conversations about the real stuff. And I love that you've provided this space to say we get tired. We're not oversimplifying these wrestles. They're big, they're deep, they're trauma, they're exhaustion, but man, we need everybody. We need everybody. We need all the stewardships and all the issues and all the paradoxes and all the stuff.
All the perspectives.
All the perspectives. Because when I sit down on the side of the road, it's my LGBT friends that sit down and go, yeah, me too. Me too. I totally get it. I'm tired too. And they're the ones that are like, get up. Come on.
Let's do this.
Yeah. So find your sacred grove and keep walking. Keep walking because, man, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like in the coming days, but if the pattern of the Book of Mormon is true, it was 2 dudes in a cave at the end. That was not a party. That was not a party, Roseanne. That was not a party.
No.
So, you know, when I was a teenager, I used to think it was going to be this big party and then Jesus would come.
Right. Yeah.
So, like, you know, the confetti and we'd have like the charcuterie boards and we would all be like, I don't think it's going to be that way.
No, it's going to be just a touch harder than that, I think. Yeah.
We're going to be like, remember when 2020 and that pandemic and we thought that was hard? Remember?
Man, all I can do is focus on today. If I even think too far ahead, I'm like, I'm going to have a meltdown. Exactly. But oh my gosh, thank you so much for being here with us today. What a fun, wonderful, cathartic feeling I have. Like, I just feel like I understand just a little bit better on those things that really matter to our Heavenly Father inside, that are happening inside of us. And we're in a time that's tough. And I just keep going back to those same thoughts of finding your sacred grove. And the scripture that always comes to me is that, you know, peace be with you. My peace I give unto you, not as the world
not as the world
give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. And it's almost that still that we all need. So I am so grateful for you and taking your time to be with me today.
Thank you for letting me pontificate and share, because
anytime.
You know, I feel like when we reshare our faith stories, it strengthens our faith. So I feel so grateful for the indulging that you've given to kind of go into detail where we didn't have a commercial break. And, you know, I don't have an editor saying, you got to stop. And because that's why we reread the same stories and we tell the same stories. And because that's what, you know, and so, I hope that the viewers today will share their faith stories with someone else today, because that's why we journal and we reshare and we have testimony meeting, right? That's the reason. That's the reason.
Amen.
Because it sinks in our heart. That's why Moroni said to Joseph Smith, you better tell your dad what happened. And I think it's because he's like, because if you don't, you're going to doubt it and forget it. So thank you. Thank you for letting me talk.
Well, thank you so much. We'll say goodbye to our audience right now. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.